Welcome, friend. Follow me. We're going somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous. Most people would never dare enter the place we are going. There's no telling what horrors we'll find, what terrors we'll uncover. Don't say I didn't warn you. We might discover terrible monsters lurking there. Be careful, they could follow you out, or maybe they're already inside you. Are you afraid? Good. Now you are ready to enter the Warning Woods. He could hear them distinctly, even through the door. Nick shrunk down to his hands and knees and looked under the crack at the bottom. He squinted one eye shut and held the other so close to the floor he felt pressure on his lashes. He did not see anyone standing on the other side of the door. He could hear them, though. He could definitely hear them. They hissed like fingernails on a rusty car frame. Their voices sounded pained and forced. Their breaths merely rattles. One of them knocked twice, just like they did on Nick's front door when he mistakenly let them in. They had knocked so calmly, so evenly, that even though it was the middle of the night, Nick had gone to the door just to see who might be out there. His apartment building was locked to anyone without the monthly altered code, so he'd assumed the knocker must have been one of his neighbors, some of whom he knew. He had peered through the peephole, but saw only the empty hallway. He'd opened the door to look down the hallway and make sure one of his neighbors hadn't knocked seeking help. He'd seen no one in either direction. A cold rush of air had then slipped through the doorway, passing above, below, and all around Nick's body. He'd felt it for only a second before the air fell still again. The wind had been too forceful to blame on the air conditioning. The hallway had no windows, and all the windows in his apartment had been closed. After feeling the cold rush, he double-checked all of them after locking his front door again. And now the ones who came with the wind were knocking on his bedroom door, which did not lock. He'd retreated there before remembering that. At least the spirits were polite enough to knock. Nick tried mustering the courage to speak to them. He could hear them whispering to each other like a couple of rattlesnakes, so he knew they could talk. But every time he opened his mouth, no more than a squeak from the back of his throat came out. While he still wished he'd run to the bathroom in order to lock the door between himself and those on the other side, Nick found one benefit to being in his bedroom. No, it was not the window, which would let him out to a 3-story drop onto concrete. It was the limited edition bottle of Gentleman Jack he kept on the shelf above his desk as a bookend. He'd been saving it for a yet-to-be-determined special occasion, but thought an emergency would suffice. He twisted the top off and swallowed a sip. The bottle looked better than the whiskey tasted. He took another, longer swallow, then replaced the topper and returned to the door. Whiskey often gave him enough confidence to talk to women. Maybe it would give him enough to talk to ghosts. "Leave me alone," he said. He wanted to yell it, but the words came out passively, like a mere suggestion rather than a command. The door began to bulge inward. The wood groaned. The hinges croaked. Then came a popping sound, and Nick saw one of the screws securing the doorknob extend slightly, then droop. "Please stop." His voice came out more forcefully, but just as pathetic. He ran forward and grabbed the knob with both hands, leaving the whiskey bottle open on his desk behind him. The door relaxed. The loose screw didn't fully return to its proper position, but it straightened. Nick released his pent-up breath, grateful for the momentary reprieve. It ended with a single, brutal impact on the other side of the door. Then the silence resumed. Nick did not believe he deserved this torment. He knew he'd made a mistake, but he'd spent 27 years living as an upstanding person, a responsible employee, a friendly neighbor, a good son. Did any of that matter now? Would his track record over the past decades mean anything after this night? To those who knew him, perhaps. To those lurking outside his door, he imagined nothing he'd done prior to that night mattered at all. He heard them whispering again, and this time their voices seemed to be directed at him. They had a rhythm, an echoing cadence. He picked up a thermos sitting on his desk from earlier in the day, still about half full of unfinished coffee, and approached the door at a silent pace. He put his ear an inch from the wood, closed his eyes, and listened. "Come out now, come out now, come out now." They were whispering in disjointed unison. The doorknob vibrated and croaked. Nick's eyes opened and flashed to it. He hoped the sound had resulted from the knob settling after nearly breaking, but he carefully wrapped the fingers of his free hand around it, just in case. He felt the knob move slightly under his fingers as its twin on the other side began to turn. "Stop!" Nick yelled, clamping down on the doorknob. Dropping the thermos, he gripped it with both hands and braced his shoulder. The voices on the other side stopped as the knob fought against his grip. The spirits on the other side were strong. Feeling their strength on the doorknob redoubled Nick's fear of what they might be able to do to him if they got in. He turned around, grabbed the side of his cheap desk, and yanked, pulling the desk toward him and knocking almost everything on it over. His lamp and computer both jerked to the far side, their cords still plugged into the wall. The lamp crashed to the floor, followed by the bottle of Jack, which spilled all over his keyboard. Nick didn't care. He yanked the desk again, sending more objects cascading off. When he jammed the desk's corner against the bedroom door, even his computer finally toppled to the floor. Nick stepped over the desk and wedged it flush against the door, then went to the window. It was his only way out. Yes, it led to a sheer 3-story drop, but his balcony was only about 5 feet to the left of the window. If he could get to it, he could run through his apartment, past the spirits, and out into the hallway. He could escape the building from there. How far would he need to run to escape the ghosts? Was it even possible? These were questions he determined he would face later, not now. Now he needed to get out of his bedroom before the whispering spirits, who were already pressing the door against the desk, entered. By the time Nick slid the window open, the door behind him had already opened a crack. It started beating against the flimsy desk. His window, like every bedroom in the building, was an awning style that opened outward vertically. This did not allow him much room to maneuver after he raised the window and removed the screen. His ruined keyboard clattered against one of the desk's legs as the door struck it again. The door now had multiple inches to use as runway before each blow. Nick decided he needed to take advantage of whatever brief opportunity he had to escape. He put his feet on the windowsill and gripped the edge of the window pane, twisting his body as he stood halfway outside, hanging over 42 feet of sucking air. He hadn't thought about the wind. It was somewhat responsible for the situation he now found himself in. Telling himself not to look down, Nick straightened himself and reached for the balcony. His reach ended a little over a foot short, and that was only if he wanted to try swinging to the balcony with one hand. To use both, as he would certainly need to, he would need to jump. Inside his room, which he could not see into anymore, a loud crash nearly made him slip. The desk finally gave way. Nick heard the familiar sound of his bedroom door knocking against the spring doorstep with enough force to bounce back. They were in. He jumped. The moment he spent in the air felt nearly the same as the moment after the accident that catalyzed his situation. Nick felt a similar sickening weightlessness in his stomach and chest, and an identical blankness in his mind. An unreality. It was like his consciousness temporarily abandoned him to save itself the discomfort of the position he had put it in. But just like they'd gripped the steering wheel to keep his truck from careening off the road, Nick's hands wrapped around the railing. And just like he'd stomped the brake, his right foot pressed against the balcony. He'd done it. He survived. Before his palms sweat so much he lost his grip, Nick climbed over the railing and collapsed on the cool boards. He gave himself 3 seconds, which he counted out in his head, to rest. Surely, he thought, the spirits knew by now that he'd gone out the window. Surely they would put together where he had jumped to. He hauled himself to his feet and ran at the sliding door, gripped its vertical handle, and pulled. But the door remained still. He'd locked it. He almost never locked his balcony door. Why bother? But that night he'd come home so paranoid he'd taken no chances. He thought it might be the police who came looking for him, not the ghosts of the 2 people he'd left bleeding in the ditch. To him, ghosts didn't exist beyond fiction, much like a hit and run was something he'd only ever read about and never imagined he might perpetrate. Yet there they were, both former fictions staring back at him through the glass door, their eyes red with blood and speckled with dirt. Between the 2 of them, they had only 3 eyes. The man's left eye, as well as most of that side of his head, had been ground away when Nick's truck dragged him along the gravel shoulder before depositing him in the ditch. The woman's injuries were less visible, but no less destructive. She'd been struck by the stalled motorcycle they'd been diagnosing on the side of the highway. It impacted her after Nick struck it with his truck. Then she and the bike rolled down the ditch in a tangle of flesh and metal. Nick wasn't sure exactly what killed her, but she hadn't been moving after he got out to yank her boyfriend or husband or brother's arm out of his truck's grill. The man now used that very same arm, bent at a nauseating angle, to flick the lock on the sliding door open. He performed this action with a grim satisfaction betrayed not only by his movements, but by the way he smiled at Nick through the glass with his few remaining teeth. One tooth fell out of his grin, bounced off his leather jacket, and plinked against the glass as Nick stumbled backward. "You were practically standing in the road," Nick yelled, unafraid of who might hear him. He hoped his voice would wake some of his neighbors. Maybe someone would call the police. They were the last people he'd wanted to see when he came home, but now it was either them or the spirits who would take him, and he had a clear choice for who he'd prefer. He yelled, "You were both already dead. It's not like I could have saved you if I stayed. It would have ruined my life. What's the point of that? There was nothing I could do for you. What would have changed if I stayed?" The door began to slide open. Panic setting in, Nick stammered, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have left. I know I should have called somebody." The man's spirit stepped onto the balcony, followed closely by the woman's. Nick could tell by the way she moved that her hips were broken. She looked like she might fold in half at any moment. Something sticky and glistening hung out of the blood-stained shirt under her jacket. It swung with each disjointed step she took. The spirits crowded him into the far corner of the balcony where he pressed himself against the rail with nowhere left to go. "Please," Nick pleaded. "I just made a mistake. I just looked down for a second, okay? I thought I was the only one on the road. I didn't see you. It's like you just appeared out of nowhere." His excuses passed through the spirits as inconsequentially as the chilling wind. "No, please." The man's broken arm straightened as it extended toward Nick's throat. Nick turned away, attempting in a last-ditch effort to climb over the railing again. He wondered if, like in a spy movie, he could leap to the next balcony over and down. Before he swung his second leg over the rail, though, 4 frigid hands gripped his clothes. He felt the sharp point of one of the man's broken arm bones jabbing into his shoulder. Nick shoved the hands off, nearly falling over the rail as he did. He quickly regained his balance, swung his leg over the rail, aimed for the balcony diagonally down from him, and leapt. He did not make it this time.
You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes I call Into the Woods, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Warning Woods. And when you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into The Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.